The usher glanced at the 2 empty seats in the front row, then back at me. "These are still reserved for your parents." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Not anymore. Around me, cameras floated over a sea of smiling families. Classmates hugged their mothers. Fathers adjusted phones to record every second. Someone behind me laughed as 3 generations squeezed together for a photo. My phone buzzed. "Mom, send pictures later. Have fun." That was it. No apology. No, we wish we could be there. Just 3 words that somehow hurt more than if she'd said nothing at all. 2 days earlier, she'd looked me straight in the eye and said, "Ethan's ski vacation can't be moved, Mila. Your ceremony happens all the time." "It happens once," I'd corrected quietly. She'd shrugged. "You'll have graduation too." As if earning the right to wear my first white coat after years of medical school was interchangeable with any other event. I slipped my phone into my pocket before anyone could see my hands shaking. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Mila." Dr. Raymond Foster, the physician who had mentored me since my first clinical rotation, stood beside me. He looked toward the empty seats, then back at my face. He didn't ask where my parents were. He already knew. Without hesitation, he turned toward an elderly couple standing near the aisle. "Mom, Dad," he said gently, "would you do me a favor?" I blinked in surprise. His parents exchanged a quick glance before walking over. Dr. Foster smiled at me. No one should begin a day like this staring at empty chairs. I immediately shook my head. I couldn't ask them to. "You're not asking," his mother interrupted warmly. "We're offering." His father grinned. "And we'd be honored." For the first time all morning, I felt my chest loosen just enough to breathe. I thanked them quietly as they settled into the seats that had been waiting for people who had chosen not to come. The auditorium lights dimmed. Students began lining up backstage, adjusting their white coats one final time before the procession. Around me, conversations buzzed with excitement. My whole family's here. My grandparents drove 6 hours. My little sister made me a sign. I smiled politely whenever someone spoke to me, careful not to mention that my parents had decided a luxury ski vacation with my older brother was more important than this day. It wasn't even because they couldn't afford to come. That had been the explanation for weeks. Flights were too expensive. Hotels were out of the budget. Then Ethan suggested a last-minute ski trip. Suddenly, the budget wasn't a problem anymore. The realization had settled in long before the ceremony. It had never been about the money. It had been about priorities. And I wasn't one of them. Dr. Foster rested a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You earned today," he said. "Don't let someone else's decision take it away from you." Before I could answer, 2 event staff members approached the front row. One carried a clipboard. The other spoke quietly into a headset. She leaned toward Dr. Foster's parents. "Just confirming," she asked. "These 2 will remain seated with Ms. Chen through the end of the ceremony." Dr. Foster frowned slightly. "Yes, is there a reason?" The staff member offered a polite smile, but didn't answer. Instead, she checked a box on her clipboard, spoke softly into her microphone, and walked away. I watched her disappear behind the stage curtain, wondering why it suddenly mattered who was sitting beside me. Something about that exchange didn't feel routine. And whatever was about to happen, I had no idea it was about to change everything. Backstage, the excitement grew louder as each row of students prepared to enter the auditorium. My classmate Jasmine adjusted her white coat and smiled. "My dad flew in from Seattle. He hasn't missed a single milestone." "That's amazing," I said, meaning it. She glanced toward me. "What about your family? I thought you said your parents were coming." I hesitated for only a second. They had another commitment. Before she could ask anything else, another student called her over for a group photo. I was grateful for the interruption. As we waited, memories surfaced whether I wanted them to or not. When Ethan had a regional ski competition in high school, My parents drove 8 hours through a snowstorm so they wouldn't miss his first run. When I received my undergraduate research award, my mother had texted * congratulations. Tell us about it over dinner next week. There had always been a reason. There had always been something more important. Medical school hadn't changed that. When I invited them to today's ceremony, my father sighed over the phone. Flights, hotels, it's just too much right now. 3 weeks later, Ethan posted photos of new ski equipment with the caption, "Family vacation loading." The numbers had never been the problem. The choices were. A gentle knock on the dressing room door interrupted my thoughts. Dr. Foster's parents stepped inside. His mother held out a small handkerchief embroidered with blue flowers. "I always carry an extra," she said with a warm smile. "Happy tears have a habit of showing up at ceremonies." His father chuckled, "And if they don't, we'll pretend we never saw them." I laughed for the first time that morning. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You barely know me." His mother squeezed my hand. "We know enough." A production assistant entered carrying a camera. "Ms. Chen," she asked, "could I get a quick photo of you with a guest seated beside you?" "Sure," I replied, assuming it was for the ceremony live stream. The assistant snapped several pictures, thanked us, and hurried away without offering any explanation. Minutes later, another staff member approached with a headset pressed against one ear. She looked directly at Dr. Foster's parents before speaking in a hushed voice. "Please make sure those two stay in their seats until the very end." The music swelled as the ceremony officially began. Rows of students filed into the auditorium, while hundreds of family members rose to applaud. My heart pounded beneath my white coat as I spotted Dr. Foster's parents in the front row. The moment they saw me looking their way, they stood and waved enthusiastically. "That's our future doctor," Mr. Foster called with a grin. Several people around them laughed and clapped even louder. One by one, my classmates crossed the stage. Every name was followed by cheers from proud parents, siblings, and friends. When my turn finally came, I stepped forward as my name echoed through the auditorium. Mila Chen. The applause surprised me. Faculty members smiled as I accepted my white coat, and I caught Dr. Foster nodding proudly from the side of the stage. His parents were on their feet again, applauding with genuine joy that somehow made the empty seats beside them hurt a little less. High above the audience, television cameras tracked the ceremony, lingering briefly on the smiling couple celebrating me. Hundreds of miles away, Ethan was laughing with friends outside a ski lodge, while my parents enjoyed lunch on the patio overlooking the slopes. My mother's phone vibrated twice. "Are you watching Mila on TV?" Another notification followed. "Turn on the live stream." She glanced at the screen, silenced the alerts, and slipped the phone back into her pocket. "We'll catch up later," she said. "Today is Ethan's vacation." Back inside the auditorium, just as the final students received their white coats, the master of ceremonies returned to the podium instead of closing the event. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "before we conclude today's program, we have one additional presentation." The room fell silent. This year, a national panel reviewed nominations from hospitals, physicians, and community organizations across the country. One graduate has been selected for extraordinary service to underserved communities. I frowned in confusion, along with everyone else. "I didn't know there was another award," someone whispered behind me. Neither did I. A producer hurried toward the front row and quietly spoke to Dr. Foster's parents. "Would you please come with me?" They exchanged puzzled glances before following her toward the stage. The host smiled as an envelope was opened. The recipient will also receive a community impact grant in the amount of... She paused. $750,000. For a moment, the entire auditorium went silent. I stared at the stage, convinced I had misheard the number. $750,000, I whispered. The host smiled toward me. "Mila Chen, would you please join us?" My legs felt unsteady as I walked forward. The audience erupted into applause that seemed to grow louder with every step. Dr. Foster stood waiting near the podium, smiling in a way that suggested he'd been keeping an impossible secret. As I reached the microphone, the producer gently guided Dr. Foster's parents to stand beside me. The host addressed the audience. "We also want to recognize those who have supported today's recipient." Mrs. Foster immediately shook her head with a humble smile. "We should be clear," she said into the microphone. "We're not Mila's biological parents." The room became noticeably quieter. "We're Dr. Foster's parents," Mr. Foster continued. "When we learned she'd be sitting alone today, we were honored to fill those seats." I covered my mouth, unable to stop the tears. Mrs. Foster reached over and squeezed my hand. "No one should celebrate a day like this alone." The cameras captured every second. Within minutes, viewers watching the live stream began asking the same question online. Where are her parents? Friends from medical school posted congratulatory photos. Relatives shared clips from the ceremony. Neighbors back home recognized our family name and started connecting the pieces. Meanwhile, at the ski resort, my mother's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. She finally unlocked it. Dozens of text messages. Missed calls from relatives. News alerts featuring my name. A cousin had sent a link with the message, "Please tell me this isn't why you skipped her ceremony." My father opened the live stream replay. The first image he saw was Dr. Foster's parents standing proudly beside me on national television. "They think those are her parents," he muttered. "No," my mother replied quietly as she reached for her phone. "Call Mila right now." By the time the ceremony ended, my phone showed more than 30 missed calls from both of them. I didn't answer. I was still surrounded by classmates, faculty members, and reporters asking about the award. Hours later, after the televised interview aired across local news stations and spread online, I finally sat down in the quiet of the hospital courtyard. My phone lit up again. I unlocked the screen. 91 missed calls. Before I could decide whether to respond, it started ringing once more. Continuing with the conclusion, delivering the full payoff from the outline. I looked at the screen as my mother's name flashed across it again. This time I answered. Before I could say a word, she spoke. "Mila, people are saying terrible things about us. Everyone thinks we abandoned you." I closed my eyes for a moment. "You did." Silence. Then my father came onto the call. "We didn't know anything like this was going to happen." "I know," I replied calmly. "That's not why this hurts." They waited. "You skipped the ceremony because you believed it wasn't important." Neither of them had an answer. A few minutes later, Dr. Foster found me sitting outside the auditorium. He handed me a folder containing the official award documents. "I suppose I owe you an explanation," he said with a smile. He told me that months earlier, after watching me organize free medical clinics, weekend health screenings, and educational outreach for underserved neighborhoods while carrying a full medical school workload, he had quietly submitted my name for the National Community Impact Award. He hadn't done it alone. Hospitals where I had volunteered, attending physicians, and several community organizations had all written letters describing the same thing, that I consistently showed up for people who had nowhere else to turn. The selection committee had chosen me unanimously. "The television producers wanted to surprise you," Dr. Foster explained. "They also wanted to recognize the people supporting you from the audience. They assumed your family would be there." Instead, his parents had become the people standing beside me. Not because anyone planned it. Because they were the ones who showed up. Over the following days, clips from the ceremony spread throughout our hometown. Friends congratulated me. Former teachers reached out. Neighbors who had known my family for years began asking my parents why they had missed such an important milestone. The explanation about a ski vacation traveled just as quickly as the award itself. Even Ethan called me. "I didn't know they were skipping your ceremony," he admitted. If I'd known, I would have told them to stay. I believe you, I said. For the first time in years, none of my frustration was directed at him. He hadn't made the decision. My parents had. They continued calling over the next several weeks, asking to meet, insisting people had misunderstood the situation. I finally agreed to one conversation. My mother started by saying, "We're embarrassed." I nodded. I was hurt. The difference hung in the air between us. "I've spent years hoping that if I worked hard enough, one day I'd become your priority," I said. "I'm done chasing that." There was nothing left to argue about. I wished them well, but I also made it clear that my boundaries were no longer negotiable. The award funding allowed me to expand the community health programs that had inspired the nomination in the first place. What began as volunteer clinics grew into a network serving families who otherwise struggled to access medical care. When I started my residency a few months later, the front row at the welcome ceremony was already full. Dr. Foster was there. His parents waved the moment they saw me. So did my closest friends and several colleagues who had become like family along the way. Every reserved seat was occupied by someone who had chosen to be present. My parents weren't invited. As I walked forward in my white coat, I didn't glance toward the entrance. I already knew everyone who mattered was in the room. I stopped waiting for the people who never showed up and built my life with the ones who always would.